Welcome to our journey into Highway 97's past. We realise that not all businesses are featured here. Some we simply couldn't find significant information for. We also acknowledge that there were businesses further south than the intersection of Highway 97 and Beaver Lake Road and Glenmore Road. As you entered Winfield from the south, one of the first businesses you would have seen on your left would be the Texaco gas station. This gas station changed hands several times before being demolished to make way for the widening of the highway. In this photograph, you can see Beaver Lake Road on the right, and to the right of that you can see Sai Kobayashi's house. Just past Beaver Lake Road on the right, we can see Sai Kobayashi's Wind Center, Radio and Electric. Anthony T. Kobayashi, otherwise known as Sai, was born in the Seaton Park area in 1915 and died in Kelowna General Hospital in 2001. Sai had a music and appliance store in Winfield, repairing radios and televisions. He was also an electrical contractor. His company van referred to him as a radiotrician. Sai was extensively involved in the community and received many awards in recognition of his service. We can see Sai's store on the far right, with Matt's Hardware just beyond it. On the opposite side of the road, on the left, we can see Sapinski's Red and White Grocery. It later became the Kelvern store owned by Herb Forster. This store was lost to highway widening. This is what the approach into Winfield looks like today. Just past Wind Center Radio and Electric, we can see Matt's Hardware. This building, lost to highway widening, had seen many changes over the years. Built in the 1950s, it was originally known as Matt's Hardware. It remained as a hardware store through a few ownership changes, including ownership by Stan Kruger, and later housed a doctor's office and the offices of the Calendar newspaper. The Lake Country Motel that we can see in the middle of the photo also went through many changes throughout the years. It started out as a motel with one unit leased to Triple S Realty, then became a Red Rooster convenience store and video rental. A library once stood on the property but sadly burned down along with all the books. It became a motel once more before becoming the Super 8 motel that operates there today. This is a recent view of the approximate site of Matt's Hardware. Still moving on and still looking to the right, we can now see the famous Al's Cafe. Built by Albert or Al and Ida Vecchio in the 1940s, Al's Cafe operated for over 40 years. With a pool hall downstairs and a charismatic owner, Al's Cafe was a favourite with old and young alike. As well as running the cafe, Al was the fire chief and also the first fire truck dispatcher. Al manned a special fire phone that would sound the alarm through a siren mounted on the cafe roof. The Vecchios sold the business in 1975, but the cafe continued to operate under different managers until the cafe closed for good in 1991. In the early 1980s, a radio talk show was broadcast from the cafe. In 1993, Al and Ida sold the property, which was then demolished for highway widening. The Winfield Professional Building stands on the former site of Al's Cafe. Continuing to look right, we can now see the Chevron gas station. Bob Henderson built a gas station which he ran until he sold it in the mid-70s, having previously run the Texaco station further south on the highway, which we saw when we started our journey. The gas station was lost to highway widening. A Petro-Canada gas station now operates in the same area. Now looking at the other side of the highway, looking west, we can now see the Winfield Garage. The Winfield Garage, owned by Ott Burns as far back as the 1930s, was bought by Luigi Romei in 1961. Luigi's Garage was a popular place with local teens because Luigi allowed them to work on their own vehicles. Due to health issues in the late 70s, Luigi applied for licenses to operate a pub and restaurant. The garage was torn down and Luigi replaced it with Il Cavaliere pub and La Gondola restaurant in 1978. The Romei family added a liquor store and ran the businesses until the late 80s. The popular Woody's pub now operates in the same building, and one of Luigi's sons, Mike, still runs the liquor store. Continuing to look at the west side of the highway, we can now see the Winfield General Store. After Mr. Lawley's store on the corner of Highway 97 and Berry Road burned down in 1927, he built a new store a little further south. The store was run by a few different people between 1931 and 1934. Ernest Clement bought the store in December 1934 and started operating the store the following year in partnership with his son Les. Ernest's daughter Wilma also worked with her father and brother. When Ernest died suddenly in 1947, Les took over as sole owner. The store served as a Greyhound bus station until Al's Cafe was built in 1948. A post office operated from the store from 1948 until it was moved to the building on Berry Road in 1963. In 1957, Les sold the store to Ernie Oxenham, who sold it to Howard Ransom a couple of years later. After Les sold the store, he continued to act as postmaster in the new post office until he retired from the role in 1974. The last owner of the building was Curly Andres, who ran Curly's New and Used store, famous for its slogan, "We buy junk, we sell antiques." This building was demolished for highway widening. The first photograph was taken shortly after the Clement family took over the store. The Lake Country Inn now sits roughly where the Winfield General Store used to be. Continuing on, we now switch back to the east side of the highway where we can see the Winfield Shopping Centre. Although the Winfield Shopping Centre still stands today, it has changed considerably over the years to accommodate changing needs and the widening of the highway. Originally an apple orchard, Les Clement of the Winfield General Store built the first phase of the shopping centre in 1963 when Dr. Marion Dobson asked Les to build her an office and a small pharmacy. Over the years, Les added a cafe, hairdressing salon, barber shop, bank, laundromat, grocery store and home decor store. In 1992, after owning the shopping centre for 29 years, Les sold it to a group of investors. The first photograph shows Les on the highway side of the shopping centre, and all seasons decor, which is now an automotive parts store, can be seen in the top right of the photograph. Brownie's Fried Chicken, in the centre of the photograph, is still remembered as having the best fried chicken ever and was popular from the 70s until its forced closure due to the highway widening. The second photograph shows the orchard that preceded the shopping centre. The third photograph shows us a recent view of the Winfield Shopping Centre. The Winfield Elementary School, which is now the Okanagan Boys and Girls Club, can be seen on both the second and third photographs. Back on the west side once more, we can now see Willie's Steak and Pizza. Willie Feist's Steak and Pizza restaurant still gets talked about as having the best pizza bread Lake Country locals can remember. The first photograph was taken in the 1980s when major renovations to the restaurant were almost complete. Today, the Dairy Queen stands roughly behind where Willie's Steak and Pizza used to stand. Continuing on the west side of the highway, we come to the first of two churches on our journey. This is St Margaret's Anglican Church, which was built in 1931 and consecrated in 1933. It was demolished in 1988 due to the widening of the highway. A little further on and back over on the east side of the highway, we can see our second church, St Edward's Church. St Edward's Church was built in 1949 and closed in 1985 due to electrical and plumbing problems as well as issues with access and parking created by the highway widening. However, the church building was not demolished. It was moved to a new location in Lake Country to be used as an art studio. The second photograph shows us how different the intersection with Highway 97 and Lodge Road looks today. Continuing along the highway and back on the west side, we can now see Osceola Realty. Arnott Teal built a house with a pool room, as in the game, not swimming pool, on this piece of land in 1949. He sold to John Sluicer, who opened a barber shop in the old pool room. He sold to Art and Elaine Pollard, who started Osceola Realty in 1962. A few years later, the business moved to the Winfield shopping centre, and the Pollard's daughter Penny ran a fruit stand in the building along with her husband Pierce. When the Gambles moved on, Wolf Gellhorn bought the property where he built and operated Winfield Builders Supply. An equipment rental business now operates in the same area. As we continue north, we now have a lovely view of Wood Lake to our right. As we look to the southwest of the lake, we can see Petrie's Corner. The Petrie family from Scotland started their business, Lakeshore Inn Resort, during the 1920s. The business was a vacation resort with accommodation, store and cafe, and a gas station which the Petries ran until the 1940s. The next owner, John Lewis, separated the store and cafe and the gas station from the resort and then sold the businesses to Alan Elliott around 1958. Alan then sold them to Sidney Whittle in 1969. Not long after, the businesses were sold to Bob Schroth, whose family sold them to Bill Mitchell after Bob's death in 1971. Later, the cafe was bought by the Haber family, who renamed it Hannigan's. When Hannigan's was sold in the mid-70s, it became the Green Buck Inn, which burned down a few years later. A gas station and rental business still operates on the property. Across the road from Petrie's Corner, we can see the Tasty Freeze. This was originally a standard gas station, and the building was converted into a diner which operated from the mid-60s until the mid-80s. It stands approximately in the parking lot of Tim Hortons today. Still in the same area, we now pass by the Lakeshore Garage. Lakeshore Garage was built in 1947 by Eli Swanson of Swanson Sprayers. In 1952, John Alfred Nagel, or Al, started working for Eli, and 10 years later Al bought the garage from Eli. All three of Al's children helped out by pumping gas. Over the course of the next 27 years, the Nagel family leased the garage out 3 times. In 1989, the garage was sold to be demolished for the widening of Highway 97. The former site of the Lakeshore Garage is now landscaped and maintained by the Lake Country Garden Club. Now we head about 1.5 kilometres north along the western shore of Wood Lake on the old highway, which is now known as Palmwash Parkway. We will come to 2 attractions, one on either side of the road. On the left side of the road we can see Adventureland. Built by Samuel and Dorothy Pestos in the 1960s, Adventureland proved to be a hugely popular attraction after it opened in 1966. The Pestes had owned the park for 12 years when they sold it to the owners of Kelowna's Bedrock City, who unfortunately went bankrupt in 1982. The attractions were sold off, but the old Ark found a new home on a farm in Lake Country in 2021, which it will share with the former St. Edward's Church. On the opposite side of the road to Adventureland, the lake side of the road, we can see Indian Point. The Indian Point Store and Cafe was built by Gough and Marge Rice. It was later owned by a Mr. Chudley, but burnt down in the 1960s. Now we head about 4 kilometres north along the highway to Cornwall Road, where, on the left, we will see the Okanagan Sausage Company. German immigrant Helmut West started the Okanagan Sausage Company in 1967. In the 1970s, Helmut sold the business to John and Christine van der Leek, who renamed it the Oyama Sausage Company. Helmut went on to open 2 branches of H&P Sausage, first in Winfield and then in Vernon. Helmut helped his son, Helmut Jr., start up Helmut's Sausage Kitchen, which has stores in both Kelowna and Vernon. The van der Leeks moved the Oyama Sausage Company to Vancouver in 2001. The Oyama building was damaged by fire in June 2020, only weeks after Helmut's death at the age of 84. Now we have come to the north end of Wood Lake, and if we look to the right at the intersection of the highway and Oyama Road, we can see Calwood Inn. Danny's Tea House stood on this Vernon Ellison-owned property from 1930 to 1934, when it was replaced by the Log Cabin Inn, which we can see in the first photograph. It was operated by Jim Gibb, then Art Davidson. It was renovated in 1939 and then demolished in 1947. The Calwood Inn, which we see in the second photograph, was built shortly afterwards and was a popular tourist resort and local cafe. This business was operated by Tom Tate until his death in 1941, and then by a succession of owners including Les and Isabel and Glenn and Marie Workman, Gus and Polly Reich, and Eric and Diane Metcalf. The Calwood Inn closed for good in December 1985, prior to being demolished in March 1987 for the widening of the highway. The third photograph shows the approximate location of the former Calwood Inn. Looking across the road now to the west side of the highway, we can see the Oyama store. Harry Aldred built a store on this site in 1909. He sold to Frank Rimmer in 1914, who sold it to Mrs. Walter Ray in 1918. The building burned down in 1921. It is not clear who rebuilt the store, but it was operated by the McQueens until 1935, when Alex Beaton and Myrtle Smith purchased the building and established Smith's Cash Store. This we can see in the first photograph. That store burned down in 1938, as seen in the second photograph, and was rebuilt in the style that we see in the third photograph. The store saw the addition of a butcher's shop in 1940 and a Canadian Bank of Commerce branch in 1941. The Smiths sold the store business to Harold Cummings in 1946 and then sold the building to Ben Kirsenbach in 1968. It was renamed the Ranch Supply in the 50s and operated by Henry LeBlanc and others until it closed for good in the early 80s, when the land, along with that of the Oyama Garage, was bought by the Highways Department. The fourth and fifth photographs both give us a rare glimpse of what it looked like inside the store at various times in the past. In the last photograph, we can only try to imagine where we would see Calwood Inn just right of centre and the Oyama store just left of centre. This isn't the most up-to-date photograph though. It does not show the changes that the District of Lake Country have made to incorporate walking and cycling trails. Just north of the Oyama store and still on the west side of the highway, we can see the Oyama garage. Originally the Walter Ray garage, the Oyama garage was taken over by Gordon McClure and Joe Schaumleffel in 1946. Joe Schaumleffel went on to establish Joe's Repair Shop to the south. In 1948, the Oyama garage was leased to Art Dunn, who operated it for 3 years before it was purchased by Harold Taylor, who in turn sold to Gus Reich. The Oyama garage finally closed in 1980. The second photograph dates from the 1960s. Continuing north and still on the west side of the highway, we come to the final stop of our journey, Gatsky Orchards. Wanda and Leo Gatsky married in 1931 and bought their first orchard in 1939, which they expanded to 60 acres over the next 20 years. The fruit stand building that we see in the first photograph was built in 1965 and demolished for highway widening in the late 80s. The fruit stand then moved to the farm building built in 1944, which we can see in the second photograph. When the Gatskys retired in 1980, son Bernie and grandson Alan took over. Alan and his wife Ingrid still run the business and have had to adapt to survive the highway changes, including a move into agri-tourism. Here at Lake Country Museum and Archives, we would like to thank you for joining us on this journey back through time on Highway 97 and hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We would like to thank Lake Country residents past and present for their help, in particular the members of the Lake Country Reflections group on Facebook. Without the input from you all, this project would not have been possible. Thank you.